Story 1. The long haul to nowhere. Liam had been driving for 17 hours straight. The only thing separating him from sleep was a constant drip feed of lukewarm gas station coffee and the quiet presence of Chloe beside him, her forehead occasionally bumping the window as she drifted in and out of a restless slumber. They were hauling their entire life in a U-Haul trailer, trekking from the manic chaos of the East Coast to the promise of a calmer life in the Pacific Northwest. They had taken the scenic route, which quickly translated to the no signal for 600 miles route. We're almost through the basin, right? Chloe mumbled, rubbing the condensation off her window. Liam squinted at the map app, which hadn't updated since they crossed into this patch of unnamed, scrub-dotted desert hours ago. Should be. It's called the Black Mesa Basin, I think. Looks like a geographical void. Just a whole lot of nothing. He wasn't wrong. The landscape was brutalist and uncompromising. Giant, monolithic slabs of rock rose and fell against a sky the color of old bruises. The road itself, Highway 501, was a cracked, obsidian ribbon stretching taut between two horizons that seemed too far apart. The silence was the first thing that really hit them. Once they entered the basin proper, a deep, low-lying valley surrounded by towering plateaus, the ambient noise of the truck seemed to vanish. The low rumble of the engine, the hiss of the tires, even the static from the radio, felt muffled, swallowed by the sheer emptiness. "Did you turn off the ventilation?" Chloe asked, sitting up fully. "No. Why? It's too quiet. Even the wind is gone." He glanced at the rearview mirror. The trailer was there, solid and boxy, reflecting the sickly orange light of the sinking sun. But behind it, the road they had traveled seemed to dissolve into an unnatural haze. "Maybe it's just the altitude," Liam suggested, though his heart was starting a slow, uncomfortable thrum. He reached for the radio dial, turning it up, hoping for the crackle of a gospel station, anything. He was met only by a profound, dead air, a continuous, low-frequency hum that sounded less like mechanical failure and more like a vast, silent lung breathing in the dark. "Try your phone," he urged. Chloe grabbed her charger, plugging her phone into the console. The screen remained stubbornly black. "The battery's fine, but it won't charge. It's not recognizing the power source." She tried his. Same result. The console's clock had also frozen at 3:14 a.m. "Okay. That's weird," Liam admitted, his voice a little too loud in the dead space of the cab. "Electrical issue. We'll stop at the next town and..." He stopped talking because the next town, according to the GPS's last known data point, should have been 30 miles ago. And yet, the same featureless stretch of asphalt continued, bordered by the same skeletal sagebrush and the same intimidating rock formations. "Do you remember passing that sign?" Chloe pointed nervously to a small, weathered wooden post flashing past them. It was covered in faded, hand-painted text. Liam slowed the truck, his eyes catching only a fragmented glimpse. "No exit." "Don't look back. Just some local graffiti, Chloe. Probably a joke." "It wasn't graffiti, Liam. It was nailed to the post. And it looked old. Like it's been there forever." He didn't respond, focusing instead on the odometer. He had reset the trip counter when they last stopped for gas, roughly 2 hours and 140 miles ago. Logically, they should have been through this basin and approaching civilization. He checked the trip counter again. 140.3 miles. He drove another 5 minutes, maintaining a steady 65 miles per hour. He checked the counter. 142.0 miles. He drove 10 more minutes, his anxiety tightening into a painful knot in his chest. The landscape, The shape of the ridges, the strange, twisted juniper trees, they were all starting to look awfully familiar. Then, he saw it. A dark stain on the asphalt they had passed 20 minutes ago. It looked like spilled motor oil mixed with something else, something slick and vaguely metallic. He drove past it. 5 minutes later, the odometer reading only increased by 2 miles. He saw the stain again. The same shape, the same texture. "Liam, pull over," Chloe whispered, her eyes wide and fixed on the rearview mirror. He ignored her, his foot pressing harder on the accelerator. If they were looping, stopping wouldn't help. They needed to find the way out, the scene where the road ended. He drove for a furious, panicked 10 minutes. The odometer read 145.1 miles. He saw the oil stain again. "We're looping," Chloe said, her voice shaking but steady. "We've been on the same 5-mile stretch for over an hour." Liam slammed on the brakes, the U-Haul trailer swaying violently behind them. Dust and fine sand billowed up, engulfing the truck in a choking brown cloud. "It's physics," Liam gasped, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "This is impossible. The road has to end somewhere. The satellite data, it was only a few minutes out of date when we lost signal. There's a town coming up." "There's not," Chloe said, turning to face the back window. "There's just the same road. And something else." He followed her gaze into the dissipating dust cloud. The air was still, utterly silent. The sun was now fully below the rim of the basin, and the darkness that settled was not the gentle blue-black of night, but a thick, oppressive velvet. And in that velvet, about 50 yards behind the trailer, was a shape. It wasn't a person or an animal. It was a silhouette, impossibly tall, thin, and stretched, like a figure painted onto the air with charcoal. It stood exactly where the oil stain was, but Liam knew it hadn't been there when they drove past before. It had no discernible limbs, only long, undulating edges that seemed to absorb the starlight. It wasn't moving, yet it felt like it was observing them with a malicious patience. "Don't look back," Chloe repeated, remembering the sign. Liam fumbled for the keys, his hand slipping on the plastic. "We need to turn around. We missed a junction. We have to drive back to the last town." "No," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a terrified register. "The road is looping forward, Liam. If we turn around, we'll just loop backward into it." As if to prove her point, the engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Total silence descended, broken only by the rapid, frantic drumming of their hearts. Liam turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The frozen clock on the console still read 3:14 a.m. In the rearview mirror, the tall, thin shape had moved. It hadn't walked or run. It had simply shifted position, now standing 30 yards closer. It seemed to lean into the darkness, like a hungry shadow preparing to detach itself from the night. And then, a sound. Not a sound from the outside, but from the trailer itself. A faint, sickening scrape from the contents of their lives stored just feet behind them. It sounded like a piece of furniture being slowly, deliberately dragged across the metal floor. They weren't alone on the road, and whatever it was already inside their possessions. It was already inside their life. Story 2. The darkness wasn't night. It was permanent, a physical weight pressed against the triple-paned windows of the Aurora Station dome. Dr. Elias Vance ran a weary hand over the abrasive stubble on his chin, the sound magnified by the silence. Outside, the Arctic winter had descended, bringing with it a 4-month stretch of continuous polar night and temperatures that turned breath instantly into crystalline dust. Elias had been at Aurora for 78 days. The original team of 6 was now 4. 2 weeks ago, the satellite link snapped. Not faded, not static, but a sudden, clean amputation of all communication. Their dedicated geosync feed, their secondary backup, even the emergency iridium burst transmitter, all went dead at precisely the same moment. The last data packet they received, timestamped to the millisecond of the blackout, contained only a single, corrupted waveform, like a drawing of a shattered spine. The official story, the one Elias and the remaining crew maintained for the sake of sanity, was a catastrophic geomagnetic storm, but Elias was a geophysicist. He knew what a storm looked like. It looked like chaos, not synchronized, absolute silence. Day 14 of the silent treatment, Elias, came the voice of Lena over the intercom, flat and professional. Lena was the resident biologist, and lately, the keeper of their rapidly fraying morale. Power cell B is cycling low, and Dr. Cho is asking about the coffee filters again. I think he's rationing them. Tell Cho he can drink his sludge like the rest of us, Elias replied, leaning back from the flickering console display. The temperature gauge outside the observation dome read -58 degrees Celsius. Any excursion was a calculated, lethal risk. I'm heading down to the core lab. I want another look at that anomaly. The core lab was housed in the deepest sub-level, a sealed environment designed to maintain the integrity of the millennia-old ice samples they extracted from the Greenland plateau. Elias descended the aluminum ladder, the metal groaning faintly under his weight, each step echoing in the concrete well. The air grew crisp and sterile, smelling faintly of ozone and ancient cold. He found the geologist, Dr. Alistair, Al, Cho, not rationing coffee, but standing motionless beside the refrigerated storage unit, gazing into the ice. Al was usually jittery, a man who spoke in diagrams and percentages. Tonight, he was unnervingly still. He wore his thick insulated gloves, even inside the conditioned lab. Al, you all right? Lena said you were looking for filters. Al didn't turn. He just held up a hand, a silent request for quiet. He was staring at core sample 41G, a cylindrical block of blue-black ice extracted from 3,000 meters down, dated to roughly 120,000 years ago. It was the reason they were all here. Listen, Al whispered. Elias walked closer. The hum. It was back. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't acoustic. It was a pressure, a vibration felt more in the teeth and the deep bone of the ear than heard. It was subtle enough to be dismissed as tinnitus or a resonance from the cooling unit, but Elias knew better. He had set a precision sensor on the shelf beside the core, and it was reading a low, continuous 1.4 Hz oscillation originating within the ice. It started 3 days ago, Al murmured, not taking his eyes off the sample. It's not thermal expansion. It's not molecular stress. It's humming. Like a struck tuning fork. A tuning fork from the Pleistocene, Elias said, trying to inject some professionalism into the absurdity. Did you run the spectroscopic analysis again? I did. And I ran a cross-reference on the acoustic profile against all known geological, microbial, and man-made frequencies. Nothing matches. It's unique. Al finally turned, and his face was pale, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. Elias, I think this ice is not inert. I think it's metabolizing the environment. Metabolizing. It's not decaying. It's the reverse. It's stabilizing. It's drawing on the latent energy around it. The heat, the kinetic energy, maybe even the weak electromagnetic fields. And when it draws, it hums. Al pointed to the cooling unit's thermostat. I keep dropping the temperature, trying to shock it into silence. But it's getting warmer inside the chamber, not colder. Elias frowned, pulling off his glove to press his fingers lightly against the thick glass of the containment unit. The glass felt strangely warm, almost feverish. And the radio silence? Elias asked. Correlation. The hum started hours after the silence. But I have a theory. Whatever caused the communications blackout, whether it was an external force or just a random power spike, it might have been what woke this thing up. It gave it a window, a moment of deep energy fluctuation, and it seized it. Elias stepped back, unnerved. This sounded like the kind of paranoid spiral that killed isolation crews. We're sealing it off, Al. We're going to use the plasma cutter to wrap it in a lead jacket, and we're dropping it into the emergency deep sink. We don't mess with unknown ancient biology. Al just smiled, a thin, disturbing twitch of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. Too late for that, Elias. It's already out. What are you talking about? The lab is sealed. Al took a deep breath, his chest rising stiffly. I didn't mean the organism itself. I meant the sound. The hum. It's doing something to our heads. It's erasing things. Don't you remember, Elias? Elias felt a spike of cold dread that had nothing to do with the temperature. Remember what? We were a team of 6. 2 weeks ago, Mark and Sarah left on the snowmobile to check the Northern Comms relay. Right. They went out and never came back. We searched, but the blizzard hit. That's why we're 4. Elias recited the facts, the trauma lodged firmly in his memory. Al shook his head slowly, still smiling that unnerving smile. No, they didn't leave 2 weeks ago. They left 3 days ago. Just after the hum started. And they didn't go to the northern relay, Elias. They went to the south face, looking for the geothermal vent. You remember. You signed the log. A sudden, sharp pain flared behind Elias's eyes. He felt a dizzying internal conflict. The facts Al presented seemed totally real, yet the story of 2 weeks ago, the northern relay, the blizzard, that was equally solid in his mind. The timeline was warping, the past folding in on itself. Show me the log, Elias demanded, his voice tight. Al didn't move toward the computer. Instead, he reached a gloved hand into the containment unit, touching the inexplicably warm glass wall, his breath misting on the outside. It's changing our focus, Elias. It doesn't want us focused on the truth, only on the present. And the present is this beautiful, singular cold. Al's speech was becoming slower, more measured, like the hum itself. Listen closely. It's not just a frequency. It's a voice. Elias heard it then. Beneath the low frequency thrum, an impossibly high, keen sound was emerging. Not English, not a language, but a pure, abstract concept translated into noise. A feeling of intense, absolute loneliness. As the sound peaked, Al suddenly collapsed. He didn't fall. He seemed to compress, dropping like a suit of empty clothes. The thick insulated glove he had been wearing now lay detached on the floor. Elias rushed forward, dropping to his knees. Al was unconscious, breathing in shallow, rapid gasps. But what made Elias freeze was the sight of Al's right hand, exposed and curled loosely on the sterile concrete. It was no longer pale. It wasn't frozen or frostbitten. The skin was perfectly smooth, but it had taken on a subtle, luminous blue tint, reflecting the sterile containment light like polished cobalt. And where the fingernails should have been, there were thin, glassy, razor-sharp shards of ice, growing visibly outward from the nail beds. A terrible realization struck Elias. Al wasn't just infected by an organism, he was being geologically re-engineered. The hum had found something ancient in his mind, but the ice was finding something deep in his biology, something primal, cold, and slow. Elias stumbled back, scrabbling for the intercom. Lena, get down to the lab, now. Something is wrong with Al. And bring the emergency plasma cutter. We need to freeze this room immediately. He looked up at the ceiling. The door above was sealed, secured by the station's automated lockdown. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, not with Lena's voice, but with a familiar, metallic hiss, the low-frequency hum. Then, through the speakers, a voice that was perfectly clear, calm, and inhumanly cold. It wasn't Al's, but the inflection was chillingly similar to his recent, detached tone. Elias, there are no coffee filters. You shouldn't be worried about Al. The hum is just us, correcting the inconsistencies. The lights in the core lab flickered, and the door's locking mechanism began to whine. Elias was trapped below ground with a sentient core sample, a body being turned to ice, and the chilling realization that the voice on the intercom belonged to whatever was now inhabiting the communications array, and perhaps, one of the remaining crew members. The hum was getting louder. The ice in Al's hand was growing faster. And Elias knew, with crystalline clarity, that the isolation wasn't keeping the world out, it was sealing something in. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.